Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Carter DeLoro. I'm from New York City. I went to Pomona College for undergrad, and I worked in admissions at Pomona and Occidental. I've been a school-based counselor across New England and the Midwest, and I'm currently the co-director of college counseling at the Marymount School of New York.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. This week in the news, Susan joins me to answer a question from a listener who wants to know how important are territory managers when it comes to admission decisions. And then Susan joins me again in the second segment, but Carter also joins me for a roundtable discussion. We're looking at Standard Strong and what Standard Strong students can do, and we're talking about some intangible ways students can stand out in this admission process. That'll be part 2 of 5. And then for a college spotlight, it'll be the final part of my interview with Grace Robertson-Lloyd in her 10th year at Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa. And friends, before we transition to the question from a listener, I do have to give a shout out to the UConn Huskies. First of all, they jumped all over my Spartans. We took the lead. It went back and forth at the end, but we could not persevere, and they ended up beating us 67-63. And then in one of the most thrilling games that you will ever see, they beat Duke on a 33-foot shot to go to the Final Four again, and UConn is looking for their 3rd national title in 4 games. There's a reason why they call it March Madness. It's my favorite sporting event of the year. Whatever you're doing, I hope you're taking some time away from all your work to enjoy the games. All right, let's transition to the question from a listener.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Susan, I'm excited about this. It's a great question that's full of all kinds of nuance, and it's going to vary from school to school, but let's play it and get your thoughts.
Dear YCBK team, thank you all for your wise and salient advice on all aspects regarding college admissions. My question is regarding territory managers. What are the do's and don'ts for reaching out and communicating with our local college territory manager? Do we contact them prior to college visits, after our visits, and what level of engagement do you recommend? Also, how influential are territory managers on admission selection? Thank you so much for your time.
Very interesting. And their colleges manage the recruiting and application evaluation process in a lot of different ways. It depends a little bit on size, volume, the reach of that college into, primary, secondary, and tertiary territories. There's a lot going on here, but the concept of admissions counselors having territory management responsibilities has been around for a long time. It predates me at my term in admissions. I know that. Oh, absolutely. Well, probably. Well, when I was hired to work at Bates out of college, some years out of college, I was a New York City kid, and I know that for this small liberal arts college in Maine, that they viewed Metro New York as a underdeveloped recruiting territory. So that's a good example of a targeted hire. Now, I lived in Maine for all those years. This was kind of before the the concept of, oh, well, you could live down there and whatever. But ironically, because my parents were in Manhattan, I basically was home for, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off all fall. So I would use staying with them, which was an enormous blessing for me. And the college didn't expect that to happen to save money, but it sure as heck did. But I did the school visiting and the college fairs and all that jazz in the city and in the burbs for years. And I did it in the fall for probably 5-6 weeks, and in the spring for a couple of weeks. But so that was my early experience with being a territory manager. Now, when those kids applied, the college was still in an alpha mode when I first started working there. And this was a transition a lot of colleges made around that time, where the territory manager read toward the end of the process. So I started off with, L through K or whatever. And then the second or the third evaluation of those applications, then I read my territory. So I did what I would consider fine tuning, but that kind of became passé and less efficient, because the primary readers then did not have the context of knowing schools or the priorities for the geographic area. So we flipped it, as a lot of colleges did, and colleges really never went back, where they start reading by territory. So the two universities that I have read for in the last decade both started with the territory manager. So the first college I read as part of a team for a geographic region. And then the second school, which was committee-based evaluation, I read in tandem with the territory manager. And I very often did read Metro New York, because I still know those schools very well. Sure. And work with a lot of kids in those regions. So it's interesting to think about who creates the recruiting plan for a geographic area, and that is the territory manager. They decide, how much time am I going to spend there on the road? What programs am I going to attend? Am I going to be doing interviews there or just school visits? Am I even going to visit at all? Or am I just going to work my inquiry pool and reach out to these kids and bring them along? So that's kind of how it's grown. My sense is territory managers do read the applications at some point. I think now it is more as the first reader rather than the last reader. The disadvantage there is you're not reading by school group. So at some point, as the process is winding down, the territory managers have to go back to their territories at the end of the season. And we used to call it reconciliation, where we would look then at a group from a school where there was a multiple group of applicants, and make sure that the decisions were going to kind of make sense. I'm going to be completely honest now when I say colleges really don't care that much about that anymore. That used to be an enormous priority for schools that I worked at, that we didn't want counselors to feel stunned by our decisions, right? And when all the years working at my independent school, I appreciated that when the decisions made no sense, that was a bad bit of PR for a university. Colleges simply don't care that much anymore. They really don't. They don't.
Susan, wouldn't you say even with that, there's correlation with size and selectivity, especially selectivity? So the more selective, the more we're going to be fine. Like the less selective, the more they don't want to burn those relationships. There's such a difference in admissions between schools that are really worried if they're going to keep the lights on, and worried if they're going to be open, if they're going to close, or worried if they're going to meet their class, versus ones that are frustrated because this job is mostly denying people most of the time. And I wanted to go into admissions and I'm just denying.
Right. It's meeting they're judged by how they're meeting their institution's goals.
Yeah, because I find the ones that are very scared or concerned about meeting their class, especially smaller schools, especially ones that are more holistic, especially ones that are more residential. They very much treasure those relationships
Yes,
because they know that that's going to be a key to me meeting my class. And I don't want to go around burning bridges.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I see
But
some.
sometimes volume just, that either a college doesn't kind of get to the school reading at the end, the reconciliation process. Most selective colleges have ended the practice of having a preview phone call.
Sure.
That's a privilege enjoyed by only certain schools that have very long and historic, impactful relationships with certain institutions. But even then, that's kind of almost become taboo.
But that's mostly sort of the backlash against privileging the privileged, and that as opposed to we're going to be impersonal in our approach to admissions.
That's right. The equity isn't really a value anymore in this. That, in the school reading, when I would look at a group of, say, a dozen or even 50 applicants from the same high school, the counselor would understand that some kids with lower academic ratings were going to get in because they were being recruited for something or they met an institutional priority, right? That there's no counselor that's going to argue that, even though it hurts those higher achieving kids, but who don't have, like we used to call it, the Velcro, to keep them in the pool when reductions had to be made. Those applications didn't stick. They would be very often on the waiting list because it was an affirmative read, an affirmative evaluation, but the acceptance decision didn't stick once we had to reduce the numbers, and so we could come in on target.
The reason why this question is challenging is because for some schools, I feel the territory manager can be very important, and for a lot of schools, it's not important at all. I mean, if you're a place like Drew University, I'll name a name, that is trying to be holistic and trying to really do the whole personalized admissions thing, but that, like yield is really a challenge. Then, when I had Chris Terra on the podcast, and he loved it when an applicant would email him and say, I'm going to be on your campus for a visit. Is there any way we can meet? And there's places that would absolutely love that. Oh my goodness, a student,
Absolutely.
And that's an opportunity there for you to have some FaceTime and become more. I mean, you still need to have, academic ratings that are acceptable, but it's an opportunity for you to build a little bit of a rapport with somebody and have that be taken into perspective when your file is read. You can't ignore the impact of a 20 to 30 minute meeting with somebody and the impressions that you get.
Oh, absolutely.
Then you have other schools who go to great lengths to almost protect their anonymity. And one of the clear signs of that is when you can't even find
the name
information on the website of who's assigned to what, or they don't reveal their email, and they'll be very clear, we're not in a demonstrated interest, so don't be trying to show up 2 or 3 times. And so like there's such a spectrum of this. I find in general, though, it does oftentimes correlate to size, selectivity, and holistic. Because there are other schools, I can think of some, and these are more regional publics, and they're not even really doing the whole territory manager thing. They really just have like processors. Right. That are just processing whether or not you're academically competitive. And if you are, you're going to be in. It's pretty much just simply decisions really just made off of academic metrics. So anytime we talk college, we have to be so careful.
That's right.
That we don't paint one stroke of the brush. And there's such variation out there. But I would recommend for people, especially looking at smaller schools that are holistic and residential, that you try to, like, especially, if you're visiting a college, not a bad idea to shoot an email and to be upbeat and say how excited you are about your visit. And I'm not sure if you're traveling or not, but if you're in the office, I'd love to have 15 minutes. That's going to be well received by a lot of schools, and Susan knows this. So it's so case by case.
Absolutely. And this mom, needs to understand that the communication with the territory manager for a college that is transparent about weighing demonstrated interest is going to be more important than at a school that says we don't weigh demonstrated interest. You go to the common data set and it says not considered.
Yes.
Then any communication that you have should be motivated by wanting to get answers to your questions.
Yeah, they can actually find it irksome and there is such a thing as over the top behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
There really is. I was having a communication with someone who said I'm emailing every day. I'm like, this has to stop.
Oh my gosh.
This has to stop now. So, I mean, that's an extreme.
Well, that's why some schools have student screening.
Sure.
Like at Penn, the University of Pennsylvania here in Philadelphia, their admissions staff, they work in regional committees.
Yeah.
So there's the Mid-Atlantic Admissions Committee, the New England Admissions Committee, and basically what they're saying by having that structure, and that is public, they don't give you the names of the people, but that we are experts in understanding people who live or who go to school in these areas. And if you have a question, you email the team. So what our students would find out from our school, which was in the suburbs, is that sometimes they would get a canned response. Sometimes they would have a student worker send a very helpful response, right? And rarely would they ever get an admission counselor responding. That it just wasn't what they did. And they also, Penn did weigh demonstrated interest for a long time. So who knows? But good.
Yeah, this is what I would say. This is the profile of the kinds of schools where I feel it will be most likely to be valued. One would be schools that have higher acceptance rates than lower acceptance rates, because those are ones every applicant is precious and you're showing interest in them. They get excited about that. So schools that say have a 70, this is not to say that schools that don't fit this profile don't care, but I'm just telling you some of the things that I would say. If you're seeing acceptance rates 2/3 and higher, if you're seeing holistic admissions, the school's clear about holistic admissions. If it's more residential than commuter. And then I would also say if the yield is lower, the lower the yield, and you can get access to this data, the lower the yield, the more everybody is precious, and enthusiasm for the school or interest in is important, because if I have to admit 10 kids to get one, which is literally the yield in regular admissions for some schools.
That's right.
Remember, the more people hear all the buzz out there, it's so hard to get in, they apply to more schools. I mean, how many times, Susan, do we see people in that 15 to 25 range now compared to, the numbers are starting to trek up back even 20 years ago when you and I were working together, but they're nothing like they are now. It's not uncommon at all for me anymore for someone to tell me they applied to 24 schools. And of the 24, they got into 19 or 21. Like, think about how hard that is from an admissions standpoint. Like, so I got a 1 in 20 shot. So the lower the yield, the more holistic, the higher the acceptance rate, the more residential. Those are the places where I find the territory managers most interested in building some kind of connection with you as an indication, because really at schools like that, most of the kids that apply are admissible. So your job is to try to identify the ones that are going to enroll.
That's right.
Now, a lot of what I said will still apply if you go down the selectivity scale a little bit as well. But if we're talking about the most competitive schools, they still care about yield. That's why they have ED1 and ED2 and ways of trying to lock you in. But, if they're banging down the doors, Selingo had a good idea when he said buyers and sellers. Like,
oh, wonderful.
It really captures the concept well. If you're in that place where you can be super choosy, people have to be very careful because you can make a bad impression by overdoing and thinking that the territory manager is your new BFF. And you can rub people wrong with just, like just not being sensitive to their other demands of their very busy responsibilities of their job.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything else you want to add to that? I think that kind of encapsulates sort of my take on the question.
Yeah, and the question that she ended with was just how influential are the territory managers? And I don't think there's a single. I think your description of, whoever reads a student's application assigns ratings. So there is, at that moment of evaluation, a quantification of this entire process, and it's academic and it's personal. Many colleges have a third rating now. This started quite a few years ago. That basically is an affinity rating. It's trying to get at a prediction of how likely that student is to enroll.
Yep.
And that's where a relationship with a person who has read the application, or at least who has gotten that into the student's file, that there's been a high degree of communication, intelligent communication, let's put it that way, not spam, what admissions people would consider, immature, kind of no purpose to this, but showing an evolution of a deeper level of research and an interest and deeper diving into the question of fit and affordability and, retention and all those good things. That's all good. That's all good. And that will probably influence not the academic rating and not the personal rating, but it will, if a college cares, it will potentially influence the affinity rating, which never gets an underqualified student admitted. But for the kids in the gray area of the applicant pool, where not every well-qualified student is going to be admitted, that's where sometimes that can make a difference.
Wouldn't you say sometimes it can bleed into the personal too, depending on the impression that is made?
No.
You think there's no correlation at all with the personal?
Personal ratings are quantifiable. It's now, because I see more this model of 3 dimensions of evaluation now, I think that's gone away from the old, more just academic and personal. Whereas now the personal rating in a reading is going to be more specific talents, potential areas of accomplishment and contribution.
Right. But contribution can, I've heard from admission officers who explicitly say they find value in a 60 or 90-second glimpse video because they get an impression. So, like, I'm thinking of a student I worked with a few years ago who ended up going to a Boston College info session where the student was the only one with the territory manager for 40 minutes. So they actually ended up getting to spend 40 minutes. Now, this is a very impressive person. So they were going to present extremely well in that context. They were not going to come across as somebody who is smart enough, but they're going to graduate and they're not going to know anybody. Like, all aspects of them making an impression, a very positive impression at the campus, that was going to come through if you spend 40 minutes with that student. And when that happened, in my mind, I felt, this could be helpful for you. So I just don't think people are robots that they can completely divorce the impression that can be made by. I get that there's the structures that schools put in place to try to block out some of the subjectivity, but we're still humans. And I think humans are impacted by.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Okay. All right.
It's not going to affect the personal rating, though, Mark. It's going to affect something else. The college's rubrics, and when we can get our hands on them, it's very helpful. But the rubrics have evolved to really focus on evidence, quantifiable evidence. And that varies depending on what the college values
Mm-hmm.
and what their institutional priorities are,
Mm-hmm.
right? Totally,
Mm-hmm.
totally, but the Barnard leadership is this big. It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
At another school, the big impact things are different. But because the process now has become so evidence-based, the soft influences are still there. I'm not saying that they're not, but they are not in the same rubric, because it's too darn subjective, and it's not just the pressures from the government, from the feds right now, but that's taking it to a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If a college is going to be called to defend an admissions decision,
Mm-hmm.
all that is going to go into a different box.
I mean, I definitely have seen that. I definitely, and I mean, I would argue, let's say one of the rubrics is impacting your space, which is one of the things that some people have. I would argue that sometimes through interpersonal communication, you could elevate how that's perceived by how you communicate and that. And so,
right. And that would be your communication skills,
correct,
your community building skills,
all of that.
Good
So I
stuff.
would argue that can potentially increase the desirability of somebody.
That's going to up the personal rating. Absolutely.
Right.
And
right. So that's the stuff that I'm talking about. But
right.
But the last point you made is really important. And we probably need to talk about this more. The government stuff is very real. I mean, the changes that I'm seeing with schools and what they're, I mean, I literally had somebody say to me recently that this is somebody that would have been admitted before. It's different now. We can't consider things that we could have before. We just can't.
Yeah.
And that's a casualty of this process. It was very much a candid moment, and you just see it. So it's interesting too, because if you actually look at, particularly in affirmative action, when you actually looked at the ruling initially, the ruling gave some freedom to still be able to, but it's been more the way the current administration has interpreted the ruling and the way they potentially might exact consequences on schools that has just scared them to feel it's just too risky.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Susan, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. So I'll be transparent, listeners. Like, you'll hear these questions over different episodes, but Susan and I have been on here for over 2 hours recording. It's just
having
easier
a good time.
it's easier for us to bang out like multiple questions per listener in one session with our busy schedules, but we love it, and keep sending them in, and we'll keep answering them for you. So thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Mom.
Thank you. Friends, you now have 7 books you can pick from if we play your SpeakPipe question or comment or tip on the air. We have our 4 Princeton review books, The Best 390 Colleges, College Admissions 101, Essays That Kick Apps, and Princeton Digital SAT Prep. Our 3 new editions are The Calm College Method by Lisa Ruff and Linda Depker, paperback or Kindle, Peter Pitt's Small College Magic Kindle version, and College Unmazed has a book, Your Guide to Design and Document Your Home School by Holly Ramsey and Michelle Everett, paperback edition. Our authors have generously agreed to cover the shipping and handling. Just send your name and full address, the book that you want, and the episode number where we aired your SpeakPipe question or tip. Please send that to your collegeboundkid@gmail.com, and we'll forward your request to the authors. All right, friends, let's transition to the roundtable discussion about Standard Strong and things Standard Strong students can do to stand out in the admission process.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, we've reached part 2 of 5 in the roundtable discussion on what are some of the intangibles that can make a student stand out in the competitive admission process. And in part 2, this is Carter, Susan, and I, we have a robust conversation between the difference between a resume application and a representational application. We talk about how colleges assess impact and how it's often very different from students, and even how college counselors envision this. And then Carter, Susan, and I share why we hate the term passion project. Listen and enjoy.
What are the things that you can do where you're taking what's already inside of you and going above and beyond? Because I think, in a sense, unfortunately, above and beyond is the new expectation for those most selective places. Obviously, if students don't do that, they still are going to land at some really outstanding, wonderful institutions. This is not a thing that I think that they have to do in order to get into college, which I think is what a lot of students hear and believe. But I think that if what we're talking about is, 7% admit rate school or less, that's a lot of those students are going to fill some sort of institutional priority. And so being able to identify, to make yourself, get closer to something like that is going to help you stand out a little bit. I don't know. I mean, does that resonate with you all? And if so, like, how do you kind of put that into practice on your end?
Well, I think something you're pointing out, Carter, really well is what colleges call the difference between a resume application and a representational application. And colleges are getting, at least I hear them making this distinction. I'm not sure kids get it, and I'm not sure a lot of counselors get it. But kids are looking at this as, okay, well, I'm going to get points for all these things. So if I have 6 leadership positions, I'm going to be more interesting than the kid that has 4. And they all have heard, oh, you're looked at in the context of your school, right? And whether or not you have work and family responsibilities. That's, they've heard that, and the Common App has it. But what they're not processing is that critical thinking about the difference between presenting basically a resume of accomplishments. That's my whole application, is I am going to just get it all out there, versus a representation of who I am, what I've chosen to spend my time on, what my background is, and how that has influenced my choices, and the person I understand myself to be at this juncture of my development, and the person I aspire to be as I make decisions about moving into my young adult life.
Yeah.
And that it's an enormous distinction when you read an application. And it's what colleges sometimes casually refer to. Oh, like Mark, you mentioned the word authentic. Okay, that's a word, but that's become now another somewhat meaningless buzz phrase, right? And colleges aren't unpacking that to help kids understand what that really means. We used to use the word voice. And that became kind of, another buzz phrase that everybody wearied of. And I really think that counselors and colleges can do a much better job of talking about the difference between being a walking resume and being a living, breathing representation of the person you are, but also the person you're becoming. And a resume is not about the person you're becoming.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an accounting. A resume is an accounting of your accomplishments.
Yeah, the person you've been.
That's right. And I'm afraid that that's what kids think carries all the weight.
Yeah.
Right. And, we talk about the concept of leadership, and I think this is where schools could do a better job about how do kids lead, and what does leading from the middle mean? And what does your impact on not just your age mates in your high school mean, but on the younger kids who are following behind?
Yeah.
It's one thing to say, well, I raised $7,000, with my committee for, this cause. Very different from the student who said, well, you know what, I've got some different kinds of goals, and I want to take along these younger kids with me because we need more numbers. I don't find that teenagers have a very clear sense of this, and kids I've worked with, and I'm sure the two of you could give instructions or give examples also. Kids kind of devolve to kind of, maybe it's obviously it's what they think is expected of them, but this kind of narrow vision, this resume version. My great example, and I think I shared this once before with Mark, a boy I worked with a couple of years ago, big, STEM, big, well-resourced public high school in New Jersey. He was going to be overrepresented in every applicant pool, even though he was a stellar student and had some good activities. And we talked about it. And, I said, in your questionnaire, I noticed you were kind of a student representative to the school board, but what was your initiative? What were your initiatives, your hopes in that role? Because it's not just the role it's a nice role. It shows the faculty had respect for you when they nominated you. And he said, oh, well, nothing very glamorous, nothing very interesting. And what he had accomplished actually was integrating the special ed lunchroom with the college prep lunchroom.
Oh, that is interesting.
Oh my gosh. And he had this heart feeling for kids who were being marginalized just in his own community, in his own school. And he said, you know what, they have a trailer outside the school building where they go and have lunch. Because, and he said, I talked to people about this, and it's a management issue. So he went to the special ed director and he said, I'm bringing my lunch, and I would like to eat with my classmates. They're going to be graduating with me. I just want to do that. So he started doing that, which was an absolutely enormous thing for a young person to do. But he followed his heart. And then what did he do? He started talking about it and getting other kids to come with him. And eventually it hadn't happened by graduation. They hadn't integrated the two. I felt like I was back in the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. It's like, come on, that kind of segregation. He had not even imagined writing about that. And I said, would you play with that idea and write it for me? Write your story for me. And let's take a look at it. And, things like that, kids don't think are glamorous. They might see a positive consequence. But, if a college in their rubric, their assessment rubric, has other-centeredness, awareness of their own advantages, right? A sense of action, whatever it is in their community, it's extremely powerful. And he ended up writing, I wouldn't be telling this story. It was a fabulous piece of writing. And he's like, really? Are you sure we're good with this? And I'm like, honest to gosh, this is opening a window into who you are and what motivates you and into the person you're likely to be on that college campus. So Mark, what you just said a minute ago about colleges want to see what your potential contribution is, the impact that you're going to have on their campus. Now, they can only guess, right? Because we all work with athletes who are like, oh, I can't wait that when I don't have every afternoon soccer practice, I've hung in there, but okay, if that's your story, who are you going to be? Who are you becoming? as you turn this corner?
I, oh, sorry, Mark.
Go ahead, Carter.
Well,
I won't forget what I'm going to say. I wrote some notes down.
I love the way that Susan, you talk about that resume application versus the representational application, because I do think that is sort of indicative of the kid who meets the threshold, right? The kid who's going to be competitive. If you have the resume application, you're certainly competitive in the pool in all likelihood, because you've done a lot of the things that are going to be impressive. But I do think that representational piece is again part of that above and beyond, right? In the same way that a resume might get you an interview, a phone interview for a job. But then when you're in the interview, they want to know what else, and not just have you restate all the things that you did. In that description, that story of the student that you worked with, who worked, with the special needs kids in the cafeteria, I think there are kind of two types of kids in those positions. And one is the kid that you described who does these special things but doesn't realize that they're special, and they kind of need some help uncovering that this thing that feels normal and natural to them is actually something that will help them stand out, because it really is something unique and special. And that's where outside, objective professionals like ourselves can come in and hear that and say, wait, that's actually something that most people don't do, and that you might want to highlight. And I think that there are those kids out there who may have a position like that and may have the mindset that, like, if you have the resume application mindset, then you may just think, well, I got the job. I have the role. I don't need to do anything else, or even to think, what else can I do to stand out because I have this title now. And those to me are the kids that might need a little nudge, might need to be able to be shown what the possibility is, for me to say, well, what is that initiative? What initiative have you done? And then they may say, I've had students in my practice who say, I don't know, and they really don't know. They really maybe haven't done one of those things. And I can say to them, well, what do you want to do? Let's brainstorm this. Let's go think about how you can take some action. And I guess I share that to say that, to me, these things are not things that kids have or they don't, right? Or that it's never like too late necessarily if you have not gone out and done one of these things that's interesting and special, even if it is kind of, smaller in terms of its breadth and focus. But I think a lot of kids just need to see what they can do to understand, like, oh, I can just pick up the phone and call somebody, or whatever it is, to try to go out there and make a difference. And then when they do that, then they have those great things that they can talk about and reflect on, and they've opened up a whole new world of possibility for themselves in the process.
I was going to comment on a couple of things you said as well, Susan. The resume and the representation. Probably the single biggest change I've made in the last 12 months as a counselor is when I work with students on their activities list now. It's been a shift away, because sometimes kids they just stuff in those 150 characters, and it's so quintessential resume. And I know 150 characters is not a lot of space, but just taking some time to talk about what you learned, how you changed, how this experience has now inspired you to want to do something, that is gold. That's admissions gold. And that's one of the places where you can move away from resume to representation. It's also one of the places where you can move from being competitive to compelling. And I loved the special needs story Susan shared, because the other thing is, I go and I look at all these kids, the ones that get in the most selective schools. There's a couple other things that I notice the majority of the time. One is they're almost always inspiring. Like, these are inspirational students. This is the student that the admission officer would love to spend an hour with over lunch. Now, one of the reasons why they're oftentimes, majority of times, I would argue, they're inspiring is because so many times admission officers are drawn to the person that they see has been doing something to improve society. They're, to use Christoph Gutentag's language, there's evidence that they're improving people's lives. It takes me back to a podcast I did in the news from one of our regular listeners who used to be an admission officer at MIT, and she wrote an article on basically 10 reasons why people with perfect scores and perfect grades aren't getting into MIT. And she highlighted, we're not impressed with the kid that says, I want to make my first million by age 30. But the person that has a cause that's improving people's lives that they're dedicated to, that's the person that has that inspirational quality. Now, where it gets tricky now is there's all this talk of passion projects like there's never been before. And there are people out there telling people, okay, we have to have you do something to make it look like you have this, as opposed to you genuinely care.
Right.
And so there's led to a lot of,
I hate that phrase.
I hate it. I hate it too. I usually say people that stand out are people that would be doing something in that regard, whether they were applying to college or not. And we might come along and tweak it and provide a little guidance. So that inspirational quality is there. A current professional friend of mine, former Yale admission officer, she likes to say, and she's in her early 60s now, but she says, when I was at Yale, we looked for people that changed the world. Now these schools want people that have already changed the world.
Oh, that's great.
But the point is there's that change the world. Like that's the kind of thing that will inspire people is when they see you're involved in helping others. Sometimes, occasionally I'll have an essay and amongst ourselves, Susan, Julia, and some of our team will ask for feedback on it. And I'll tell my family, hey, would you be okay if I get feedback from somebody? And they always love it. And I remember sharing a pretty good one with Susan, and she pinpointed this right away. It was like, there's a lot in here, but where's the impact of this on others? It's very self-absorbed. And I find that that's a piece where the kids, they really stand out. They have that inspirational quality. They have that interestingness. They're improving people's lives. And it feels very, very genuine. Now, there is another thing that I really feel I have to say, even that we talk about it all the time on the podcast. I encourage people to listen to interview 129 with Hillary, where she sort of masterfully went through and took, I think we might have used Swarthmore as an example, but we took a class and then we started saying, okay, let's say the school wants to be 50-50 by gender. Cut that out. Let's talk about the international population. Let's say they want to be 15% that. And let's say 30% of their students, which is very common at small liberal arts colleges, are going to be athletes. You start, and then you start saying they're shooting for 50 states. And then you start looking at, they want certain representation across majors. And you start realizing how few slots are down there. And the reason why I want to draw attention to this, I don't want people to come away thinking, okay, now that I sort of have either some strategies or we certainly don't want to give off the vibe that we're sharing the secret sauce. What I don't want people to think is now I just get to go wherever I want to go. Because sometimes people just erect college lists in their mind that are just not appropriate for who they are. They're just not going to be competitive at those schools, no matter what we do. And it's kind of important that people hear that. And we're talking about the most selective schools. I mean, it's pretty insane how distinctive you have to be. Susan knows this, but one of the students I worked with this year was a first place winner in the Regeneron math and science competition.
Wow.
Not just a semifinalist, the first place, the $250,000, the whole thing. And, you would expect, it's an amazing kid who's got great character. And so many things are outstanding about this student. And so, there were acceptances at some of the schools that you would think there would be, but there was a denial as well. Okay. So I say that to say like how high the bar can be. And sometimes it's not even the biggest names, because people might not, well, a school that you know very well, Carter, because you were at Pomona.
Mhm.
Sometimes people don't realize how hard it is to get into a place like Claremont McKenna,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's so small and they're
Yeah.
taking so many ED, and they're part of Harvey Mudd and Scripps when it comes to athletics. And I know from spending time there, I'm sure you know this, Carter, most of the athletes are coming from Claremont, not
Right.
from Mudd or Scripps.
Yep.
So you take the combination of ED, small school, lots of athletes. That is such a small number,
Yeah.
especially in regular admission.
Yeah.
And so it is important that people do their best to educate themselves on, am I even competitive at these schools? All right, friends, let's transition to the final part of my interview with Grace Robertson-Lloyd on Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Okay, friends, we've reached the final part 3 of 3 of my interview with Grace Robertson-Lloyd, a graduate of Grinnell College and a regional who's been working with Grinnell, both as a home-based admission officer and now in the Denver market for the last decade. In part 3, I continue sharing my perceptions I have of Grinnell, and Grace gives her amplification and clarification of my perceptions. Grace tells us whether Grinnell uses demonstrated interest in their evaluation of students and why they've made the decision they've made. And we close by Grace going on the hot seat in our lightning round. Listen and enjoy. So how would you say Grinnell does when it comes to providing an environment where a more conservative student would be comfortable? Because we know it's left-leaning, and some schools can be so left-leaning that people that are not of sort of the dominant political stripe, they go silent because they feel like, their views are going to be ridiculed. So why speak out? And they kind of keep their thoughts in their head. How would you say conservative students would feel about feeling accepted and feeling like, they can find their people?
Yeah, another great question. And like when you asked about like what would I change, I would advertise that more, because I do think that Grinnell actually, it is a left-leaning student body for sure. And there's no denying that. But at the same time, this is an institution that invites difference of opinions and invites debates, respectful debates. One thing that Grinnell does that I think is really special, and part of the one required class at Grinnell, is that they have basically a how to be a good classmate, how to be a good citizen section, like component. And so they teach you how to be respectful of people you disagree with, how to ask questions, and how to be thoughtful. And so for conservative students, I completely understand that it might be difficult and at first uncomfortable, but I feel like Grinnell is the kind of place that invites that dialogue, because how else do you learn? And you're going to be so much stronger in your own views if you know how to defend them well against people, right? And vice versa. You will also understand the holes in your potential, argument or your views by listening to and discussing with other people. If you just have the group think mentality where you are constantly surrounded by people who think exactly the same thing as you aren't going to grow as a human being. And so Grinnell really emphasizes and encourages, and it's not perfect. I don't want to pretend it's perfect, but we do encourage the idea of bringing students who have these different viewpoints and making them feel as comfortable as we can, encouraging that in the classroom, hoping that that spills into different parts of the personal experience, in the dining hall, in the lounges, whatever it might be, so that students can feel comfortable sharing those different viewpoints and growing in their own views and their own understanding, and also growing in their understanding of other people's views as well. And honestly, we need more of that right now. So I think it's something Grinnell, again, does a good job of, could advertise more, is not perfect, but they work really hard for that constantly. That is something we always are thinking about.
So Grace, this is always my hardest question to ask because, sometimes people are like, sure. And others are like, that's proprietary. Stop asking me that. And sometimes people are in the middle. So the question is, are you comfortable sharing your reader rating rubric when you read an admission file?
So I cannot share the actual reading rating rubric, but what I can share is that we are holistic review. And so for those that aren't aware of what that means, we do look at everything. We read the essay, the letters of rec. We require 2. If you submit 7, we're going to read them all. We might not be happy, but we will read them all. We will read your whole portfolio, like everything you submit to us, we will read. And that is our commitment. I always just tell students that it's important to know that there's not one thing that is an immediate yes or an immediate no, right? We are always looking for context. I was just at a case study, like I said last night, and this is a big piece of the conversation was, how does the context of this essay explain the grades? If you just denied the student based on the grades, that wouldn't be fair because look at what they've been through, which they discuss in their essay. That's why we read everything. So while I can't, again, go into the details of it, just know that we are a holistic review school that really does focus on the whole human being, because we're admitting not just students. We're admitting classmates, roommates, teammates, right? People that work with other people constantly throughout their experience. And so when we're reviewing students, we're keeping all of that in mind in our decision-making process. So
let's talk institutional priorities. We know some of them are so close to the vest that that's also proprietary. But normally there's 1 or 2 that somebody feels like they can share. Is there any institutional priority for Grinnell that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I really like the idea of good citizenship. When I'm reading a student, I always like to look for those elements or qualities that might demonstrate that this is someone that would be a good community member, whether they're already involved in supporting their community or they're someone who wants to and thinks about ways that the community can be improved. That often comes through in the extracurriculars, the essay, and the letters of rec, not the grades. And so I would say definitely the good citizenship piece is something we really as an institution focus on and are looking for. And it's something that I always enjoy seeing too. I'll also just full disclosure mention that we want students that are excited about Grinnell, have done their research on Grinnell College. We do track demonstrated interest. It is something that we care a lot about because we are such an intentional institution. You do not end up in Grinnell, Iowa by accident, whether you are a student, a townsperson, a faculty member, or a staff member. This is a very intentional community. And so we want people that are intentionally considering us. So however you can demonstrate that, whether that's through our optional supplement or doing an interview, doing a virtual visit, or doing something in person. We know that's not always accessible to everybody, but we do care about that because we want students that want us, because this isn't a place just for someone who, like you said earlier, way earlier in this interview, when you said some people just choose a school for the prestige. This is definitely a prestigious institution, but we don't want students just choosing us because we're top 15. We want students choosing us because they want to be in Grinnell, Iowa with this group of students in an open curriculum institution that is very intentional and focused on the common good. And showing that demonstrated interest helps us understand, got it, you actually know what we are about, not just the ranking.
I always appreciate when admission officers, share openly that, demonstrated interest is something that we track. That back in the day, that was not something that people divulged that often. They really kept those cards close to their heart. But, I love that transparency. So we're about to transition to a couple hot seat questions. But before we do, is there anything we haven't said about Grinnell that you want to share?
The only other thing I would just plug is please do a virtual visit. They're really fun. It's my job.
Yeah.
And it is a beautiful campus and we show it off. If you can't come in person, you can see it online with our wonderful students who will tour you unfiltered. I have no idea what they say. I don't want to know. And that's the whole point. We want you to get the real experience. So please engage with us online if you're interested or if you think your student might be a good fit. And always just reach out too. We're happy to connect. I'm happy to always talk to anybody. And you don't have to be from Denver or from New York or from New Jersey or Pennsylvania. Regardless of where you're tuning in from, I'm always happy to connect. So just kind of putting that out there for you.
And this is a good chance for me to put this plug in. So I think, Grace, you're committed, aren't you, on April 8th to go to am I saying it right? Centaurus?
Centaurus. Yeah.
Centaurus High School, which is like, 10 miles from, Denver, 20 from Boulder. They are hosting a question and answer session, going deeper into files. Many of you heard Grace and Kate and Hillary when they did the case studies. Well, we're kind of do part 2. So come on out to that, April 8th, 6 to 8 p.m. The sign-up sheet's up on yourcollegeboundkid.com under the events page. If you're planning a trip to Colorado to visit schools, see if you can work that in. I think it'll be well worth your time to come on out and meet the ladies, and you can ask your Grinnell questions or your CU Boulder questions or your Colorado College questions. So just I have one of the 3 hosts that will be here with me. I have to put that plug in. I have to. All right. Question for you, Grace. What's your first childhood memory?
Oh, like ever?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. I would say, just throwing it back. I love the ocean. I love the beach. My friend at Hamilton can attest to this because I was basically obsessed with the beach when we went on vacation together. Yeah. So my first childhood memory would be just picking up sand dollars and sea glass on the shore of LBI. I just remember being really, really young and collecting them and filling my pockets. And my parents were like, you can't take all that. It's way too much. That's way too much. But I refused. I was like, I am taking all of this.
There you go.
And so, yeah. And I still do it today. I collect all these seashells and more. So
now we'll take you back to age 18. What do you wish your 18-year-old self knew?
Oof. That it's okay to mess up and be wrong. I think like very valuable lesson that I've learned is it's better to be wrong and grow from it than pretend that you weren't wrong and not grow. It is so important. And it's something that I have carried with me forward, but definitely at the age of 18. And I started college pretty young. So I started at 17. And so for me, it was like in the midst of college, realizing it's better to be wrong and grow. But if I don't say anything or don't raise my hand because I'm scared of being wrong, I'm not really going to learn anything. So that's what I would say.
That's a good one. That's a good one. What's on your bucket list?
Okay. Hiking Mount Kilimanjaro.
Now I know you're a Colorado. My brother is my best friend. He lives in Littleton. He's been there for 33 years. He's like, when we vacation there, which we do sometimes, we're at Pagosa Springs Family Reunion. His idea of a vacation is going and doing a 14er with everybody.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. I'm not even from Colorado, but now I am like a Coloradan. So my husband and I, we've hiked Mount Fuji to the top and bottom in one day. We're doing that Grand Canyon in 1 month, in one day, to the bottom and back up. And Kilimanjaro is on our list. That's like a multi-day trip. We can't do that in one day.
Yeah.
Terrible. But yes, I would say Kilimanjaro. I've been there. It's so beautiful. State. I just need to actually do it, So, yeah.
Good stuff. By the way, 14er refers to like 14,000 foot mountain. You got to climb 14,000. Not a little 1 or 2 or 3,000, but the big 14,000.
Which is taller than Mount Fuji.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
So what is your advice to students, parents, college counselors? Those are our 3 groups, and that's our last question for the day.
So I guess general advice is just be open-minded in this process. And it's okay to also realize, oh yeah, that's not for me. I think sometimes there's pressure, and this might be like a weird hot take, but I know from my own experience living on the East Coast, everybody visits all of these wonderful institutions, and you almost feel bad saying, I don't like this one. It's not for me. It's okay to have that feeling. And I feel like it's really important. I mean, hopefully you don't feel that about Grinnell College, but but if you do, it's okay. Trust your gut. So whether you're a student or a parent, if you're a student, it's okay to say, I really don't think this is a good school for me. It doesn't feel right in my gut. If you're a parent, please respect that. And if you're a counselor, even if that student might be like wonderfully viable as a candidate for that institution, if they don't like it, let them make that decision. I know it's hard because you're working probably with amazing students, but letting them have some autonomy in this process can be so powerful because it's their first major decision in life that they are making. They're not making it alone, but they are making a decision. And you want to be supportive of that because it'll help influence all the decisions that they will make that are major at the other points in their life to come. So that's what I would say is just, it's okay to have that gut feeling and trust it, respect it, and move on. Yeah.
Yeah, and speak up. I was kind of exhilarated. I was in this counseling session yesterday, a student looking at some very selective liberal arts and science schools. But maybe the student was like you and maybe like my daughter, like really strong in all the other things, but not really like the calc just wasn't her jam. And so we were going over like pros and cons of taking calc and well, this, that, the other, and do we get a tutor? And then finally she just stopped and she said, I have to say something. I am not taking calculus. And I really appreciated it, because, you don't have to do that, right? And so, yeah, speak your truth and speak up, whatever that is. I think that's really important. So, Grace, this has been awesome. Listeners, find Grace on the road. Say hi to her. Say you heard her on Your College Bound Kid at a fair or at an info session. And Grace, if someone wants to learn more about Grinnell, give us the website and give us the social media that you recommend would be a really good social media source for students to learn more about Grinnell.
Yeah, so I'll shout out our Instagram, at Grinnell College. It is great. For the website, grinnell.edu, but Google is your friend. I would actually do Grinnell outcomes if you want to get kind of like a little deeper dive into what Grinnell students do. It's my favorite page on our website, and it shows you literally everything about our outcomes. It's super fun, and it's something that you wouldn't find unless you heard somebody say it. So I'm saying it for you. And you can always, of course, just contact me, and I'm happy to send you links, connect with you, talk to your student, whatever it might be that can be helpful. Don't be a stranger. That's what I'm here for, literally. So
can I put your email out there? Is that okay?
Please do so. Yeah.
It's Lloyd, LLOYD, GRA, 2, at Grinnell.edu. And Grinnell is GRINNELL, 2 N's, 2 L's. So yeah, shoot Grace an email. It's super rewarding when you hear from people. I know it fires me up and keeps me coming back. So this has been awesome. You were most generous with your time. You gave me an hour and 25 minutes of your precious time. Thank you very much for everything. And thanks in advance for doing the event you're going to do on April 8th, 6 to 8 for our listeners coming up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody. And thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Friends, on Monday's episode, we'll have part 3 of 5 of the roundtable discussion where we're talking about some of the intangible things that not only Standard Strong students can do, but hooked students can use as well to strengthen their case. All doing this in the context of being authentic and true to who you truly are. And then we'll have the final part of Lisa's interview with Jennifer Gershberg. Jennifer's a former attorney, former professor at the University of Maryland, who has turned her attention on helping students excel academically once they get to college. It's a great interview for high school seniors who will be transitioning to college. But if you're already in college, this interview is just as applicable to you if you want to excel in college. And friends, I saved something that's grinding my gears until the end. And this is what it is. Students spend all of this time trying to focus on match and fit. And then they get down to the last few schools. And how do they make a decision? They turn to the rankings. They turn to the rankings, sometimes called the ranksters. Now, what's wrong with turning to the rankings? The problem with turning to the rankings is they're all formula-driven, and no formula will ever match your own value system. So if you want a small school, they're not going to care about that. They might place a large school over a small school. If you want a large school, same thing. You might value being far away from home or being close to home. That won't factor into the rankings. You might value being in a large city, a small city, suburban setting, college town, or a remote location. That won't factor into the rankings. You may value cost. That won't factor into the rankings. Or that your type of kid is at the school. That won't factor into the rankings. Or the strength in your major. The overall cumulative rankings won't look at that. Or the teaching style, or career outcomes, or job placements, or internships, or experiential learning opportunities like service and study abroad and research. Or, check this out, whether kids are happy or stressed out. We don't use rankings to decide what is the best place of worship or the best church to attend, and we shouldn't use rankings to figure out what is going to be the best fit for us. Most of us would not like the idea of turning to some computer about who we should marry, and neither should we turn to the rankings to decide what college our student should attend. We shouldn't trust any of the overall cumulative rankings. They just lack the ability to be precise. And our regular listeners know that when I wrote my book, 171 Answers, I put my 10 favorite quotes at the start of that book. And it's not uncommon for me to read these quotes from time to time. And I actually had 2 of them in there on the rankings. That's how much the rankings bother me. So I'm going to close with one of them. The commercialization of college admissions has created a crisis by undermining educational values, and the commercialization has been led by the ranksters, the rankings. The rankings imply a degree of precision and authority that simply is not supported by educational data. Their influence on education in this country has grown way beyond any educational jurisdiction. They have dictated the way education is perceived and pursued. That's Lloyd Thacker, founder of the Educational Conservancy. See you on Monday, friends. And that's our show. Big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-hosts, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.